What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a talk show expecting a light-hearted interview, only to be blindsided by controversy? The result? Pure television chaos. Mark Wahlberg, known for his no-nonsense attitude and working-class Boston roots, was set to appear on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon to promote his latest action thriller. What should have been a routine late-night segment quickly unraveled into one of the most uncomfortable and explosive moments in recent talk show history. And yes, Wahlberg walked off set. If you want to see how quickly things can spiral from friendly banter to full-blown disaster, hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one story you're going to want to follow to the very end. The evening began like any other taping of The Tonight Show. The audience was buzzing, the house band was warming up, and producers were giving their final cues. Wahlberg had been on the show several times before. He was calm, composed, and genuinely excited to talk about a project he'd been passionate about for years. Backstage, things felt familiar. Wahlberg joked with the crew, ran over notes with producers, and mentally prepped to share stories from the film set. He respected the process. He wasn't there to make headlines. He was there to promote his movie. But Fallon had something else in mind. As the theme music played and Fallon delivered his signature monologue, packed with jokes and easy laughs, no one suspected what was coming. The moment Wahlberg was introduced, the energy stayed light. At first, Fallon smiled, clapped, and said warmly, "Mark Wahlberg, everybody. Great to have you back, man. You look fantastic." "Thanks, Jimmy," Wahlberg replied with a relaxed grin. "Always good to be here. Let's talk about this new movie." Fallon held up a glossy promotional poster. "Looks intense. Lots of action." But then, instead of diving into the movie, Fallon pivoted. "But before we get into that," he said, "I have to ask you about something that's been all over social media lately." Wahlberg's face shifted. This wasn't what had been discussed. Fallon continued, "There's been some renewed criticism about your past. Things you did when you were younger in Boston. Some people think it's time to address that more directly, especially now that you've reached this level of success." The crowd, sensing the change, went quiet. Wahlberg leaned back in his chair, his jaw tensed. "Jimmy," he said calmly, but firmly, "I've addressed those things many times. I've been open about my past. I've apologized. I've taken responsibility, and I've used my platform to do better. That's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. Most hosts would have backed off. Fallon doubled down. But don't you think, especially with everything happening in society, that maybe just saying sorry isn't enough? I mean, actions have consequences, right?" Gasps. Fidgeting in seats. Wahlberg's publicist visibly concerned from offstage. Wahlberg's voice hardened. "I don't know what kind of show you're running here, Jimmy, but this isn't what we agreed on. I'm here to talk about a film I've worked my ass off on, not relitigate stuff from 30 years ago that I've already addressed." Fallon pushed back again. "I'm just asking the questions the audience wants answered. Isn't that what journalism is about?" Wahlberg stared at him. "Journalism?" he repeated, incredulous. "Since when is The Tonight Show about journalism? You play games with celebrities and read Twitter posts. This is supposed to be entertainment, not some kind of ambush." The temperature in the room dropped. Fallon, looking more defiant than playful now, fired back. "Maybe the problem is that you're just not comfortable being held accountable." Wahlberg froze. His eyes locked onto Fallon. His tone dropped, but the volume of what he said next thundered across the studio. "Held accountable? You want to talk about accountability, Jimmy? Let's talk about how you promised me and my team this would be a straightforward promotional interview. Let's talk about how you're blindsiding a guest who came here in good faith to support your show. At that point, the studio was dead silent. The cameras rolled, capturing every second of the confrontation as it boiled over. And then, Wahlberg stood up. Without another word, he ripped off his mic and stormed off stage, leaving a stunned Fallon and a speechless audience behind. The segment never aired in full. But the fallout, it was immediate and massive. This wasn't the playful banter Tonight Show fans had come to expect. It was devolving into a full-blown confrontation, two strong-willed men clashing in real time, on a national stage, in front of hundreds in the studio and millions watching from home. But the real shock came with Fallon's next move. Instead of de-escalating or owning the moment, the host did the unthinkable. He doubled down. His voice dripped with smugness, his tone laced with an edge that felt foreign to his usual goofy charm. "Mark, you're getting awfully defensive for someone who says he has nothing to hide," Fallon said, eyes locked on his guest. "Maybe the truth is, you're just not used to being challenged anymore. Everyone in Hollywood worships you now." The audience gasped, audible, genuine. Several faces in the front row reflected confusion, even discomfort. This wasn't the light-hearted Fallon they knew. This was something colder, more calculated. It felt like he was deliberately pushing Wahlberg to snap. Wahlberg didn't speak at first. His face shifted, from disbelief to visible anger, and finally, to something that resembled pity. When he did respond, his voice was measured, icy. "You know what, Jimmy? I've been doing this for 25 years. I've sat across from real journalists, people who knew how to ask tough questions with respect and professionalism. This isn't journalism, and it sure as hell isn't entertainment. It's cheap." Fallon forced a short, mirthless laugh. "What's cheap?" he shot back. "Is showing up and expecting everyone to toss you softballs while you plug. Your movie. The age of celebrity worship is over, Mark." "Celebrity worship?" Wahlberg's voice rose now, his Boston accent sharper. "I never asked for worship. I asked for basic respect, and the interview your team promised me. You want to play investigative journalist? Fine. But don't lie to my team. Don't ambush your guests. And don't pretend this is about accountability, when it's really about you trying to look relevant, the house band." Usually quick to cut tension with a musical cue, was frozen. Crew members in the background exchanged wide-eyed glances. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every raw second of the unraveling. Then Fallon made what many would later call the biggest mistake of his career. He turned to the audience with a smug, performative shrug. "Well, folks," he said, "I guess we're seeing the real Mark Wahlberg tonight. Not the polished movie star. Just a guy who can't take a few tough questions." But the reaction wasn't what Fallon expected. There was no laughter, no applause. Just stunned silence, mixed with growing unease. Some audience members shifted in their seats. Others looked visibly uncomfortable. A few began filming on their phones, sensing this moment would go viral. For all the wrong reasons. Wahlberg didn't move. He stared Fallon down, and when he spoke, his voice was low and tightly controlled. "You just made a big mistake, Jimmy. You don't know me. You don't know my story. And clearly, you don't know what professionalism looks like. I came here to talk about a film that dozens of people worked their asses off to make. I came to support your show, and instead, you decided to turn this into some weird personal attack," Fallon tried to interject. "Look, if you can't take the heat, But Wahlberg cut him off sharply. Take the heat? You think this is heat? This is amateur hour. Real. Heat comes from real conversations, led by real journalists. What you're doing is playground nonsense, dressed up as journalism. The tension in the room was now unbearable. Some audience members glanced nervously toward the exits. Others braced themselves for whatever would come next. Phones were out, recording. This wasn't just an awkward interview anymore. It was turning into a late-night implosion, one that would soon dominate every headline, every feed, every trending hashtag, and Fallon, perhaps realizing too late that he'd lost control of the room and the narrative, was about to make one more disastrous decision. Maybe the truth is, Fallon said with a smirk, you're not as tough as you like to pretend. All that Boston tough guy stuff. It's just an act, right? That was the moment everything changed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Wahlberg's entire demeanor shifted. He leaned forward, his eyes locked onto Fallon's, unblinking. You want to question my toughness, he said, voice low but cutting. Let me explain something to you, Jimmy. Toughness isn't what you see in the movies. It's growing up poor in Dorchester and clawing your way out. It's owning your mistakes and working every damn day to become better than the person you used to be. Toughness is showing up with integrity, not sitting in a cushy chair throwing cheap shots at people who trusted you. The room fell quiet. Suddenly the power dynamic had reversed. Fallon, once in command, looked visibly unsettled. I think you're taking this way too seriously, he said, voice faltering. It's just television, Mark. We're just having a conversation. Just television? Wahlberg repeated, incredulous. You think that makes it okay to lie to my team? To set me up on camera? This isn't just TV to me, Jimmy. This is my life, my work, my name. And you decided to turn it into a punchline. The audience was silent now. No laughter, no applause. Just the electric charge of something very real, unraveling, live on stage. Fallon, visibly rattled, tried to steer the moment back. You know what? Maybe we should just agree to disagree and talk about the movie. I think we've both said our piece. Wahlberg stared at him, stone-faced. Move on? You think you can just flip a switch and pretend none of this happened? You insult someone's character, try to humiliate them in front of millions of people, and now you want a clean reset. That's not how this works, Jimmy. That's not how any of this works. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the band sat still. Studio crew glanced at each other, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this moment play out. Mark, I think you're overreacting, Fallon offered weakly. It's live TV. Things get heated sometimes. That's what makes it interesting. Wahlberg gave a bitter, humorless laugh. Interesting. You think ambushing your guests and disrespecting your audience is interesting. You think lying to people and trying to corner them makes for compelling content? The camera operators didn't dare look away. This wasn't the Tonight show anymore. This was something raw, unfiltered. Look, I'm sorry if you feel like I crossed a line, Fallon finally said, but the apology felt rehearsed, mechanical. Maybe we both got a little carried away. Why don't we just start over, talk about your movie, make some jokes, get back to having fun? Wahlberg's expression was one of stunned disbelief. Start over? He said slowly. You think this is a game? That you can just hit a reset button? You spent the last 10 minutes trying to humiliate me on national television, and now, because it's backfired, you want a do-over? The audience was glued to the moment. Some people had their phones out now, recording what was clearly a meltdown for the ages. I wasn't trying to humiliate you, Fallon insisted, his voice cracking. I was just trying to have a real conversation. People are always so fake, on these shows. A real conversation. Wahlberg's tone grew sharp again. You want to talk real? Fine. Let's talk about how your producers promised my team this would be a light, friendly segment about the film. Let's talk about how you looked me in the eye backstage and said you were excited to hear about the movie. Then you come out here and pull this? Fallon's face was flushed. He kept glancing nervously toward the wings, likely searching for a signal from his producers. Mark, maybe you're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be, Fallon muttered. Wahlberg's voice cracked, raw and emotional now. Jimmy, do you even understand what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you respected? I've supported this show for years. I trusted you. And now you turn around and try to tear me down. For ratings? The room was still. You could hear the quiet mechanical hum of the cameras. No one moved. I wasn't trying to destroy you, Fallon said, but the words rang empty now. I was just asking questions. Wahlberg laughed, bitter and broken. You call that asking questions? He said, shaking his head. You weren't interviewing me. You were setting me up. Jimmy, Wahlberg said, his voice sharp with emotion. You weren't asking questions. You were making accusations. You were trying to score points at my expense. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Fallon. You dug up things from my past. Things I've been open about. Things I've taken responsibility for and grown from. And you used them. Not for insight, not for truth, but to ambush me, to humiliate me. That's not journalism. That's manipulation. The confrontation had dragged on for nearly 15 minutes. An eternity in late-night television. The producers were scrambling behind the scenes, but no one dared cut to commercial. The tension was too electric. The cameras kept rolling. Everyone in the room knew they were witnessing a moment that would be replayed for years. Fallon made one. Last attempt to salvage control. Mark, I respect you, he said, voice trembling. As an actor, as a person. Maybe I handled this wrong, but I was just trying to bring something different to these interviews. Something real. Wahlberg's voice dropped to a near whisper, but the fury beneath it was unmistakable. You have a funny way of showing respect, Jimmy. Respect would have been sticking to the agreement we made. Respect would have meant asking me off camera if I was okay discussing personal stuff. Respect would have meant treating me like a human being, not a target. The audience sat frozen, silent. No laughter, no applause, just wide eyes and held breath. Some looked away, visibly uncomfortable, like they were witnessing something far too raw, too real, for public consumption. I'm sorry you feel that way, Fallon said weakly, but the apology landed flat. You're sorry I feel that way? Wahlberg said, incredulous. You're not sorry for what you did. You're just sorry I didn't sit here and take it. You're sorry your little ambush didn't go the way you hoped. Fallon opened his mouth to reply, but Wahlberg raised a hand. Firm. Final. You know what? I'm done. I'm done with this conversation, with this interview, and with you, the audience collectively inhaled. You want to play games with people's lives and reputations? Fine, but count me out. Wahlberg stood. The silence in the studio was suffocating. No one moved. Mark, wait, Fallon blurted, panic rising. Don't go. We can fix this. Let's talk about the movie. That's what people came here to see. Wahlberg paused, looked down at Fallon, and then back out to the crowd. Now you want to talk about the movie? Now, after you spent 15 minutes trying to tear me down, it's too late, Jimmy. You made your choice the moment you turned this into a trap. The audience wants to hear about your film, Fallon said desperately. Don't disappoint them. Don't disappoint them, Wahlberg repeated, disgusted. You're the one who disappointed them. They came for a real interview. You gave them a hit piece. They wanted a good conversation. You gave them a takedown. You disappointed them, not me. He pulled off his mic, laid it carefully on the side table. His movements were calm, but his anger rippled beneath every gesture. This is what happens when you forget that there are real people behind the celebrity mask, he said, voice ringing through the studio. When you think ratings matter more than respect, when you confuse being a talk show host with being a journalist, and fail at both. Fallon stood now, desperate. Mark, please. Let's start fresh. You can talk about anything you want. Wahlberg turned back to him, something like pity in his eyes. Jimmy, you still don't get it. This isn't about finishing the interview. It's about integrity, about keeping your word, about decency. And tonight, you failed on all counts. And with that, Mark Wahlberg turned and walked off stage. His footsteps echoed in the silence. The studio watched, stunned, as one of Hollywood's biggest stars exited one of TV's most iconic stages, without looking back. He reached the edge, paused and glanced over his shoulder. You know what's really sad, Jimmy? He said. I used to respect you. I thought you were one of the good guys. I thought you understood that you can entertain without tearing someone down. I guess I was wrong. Then he was gone. The cameras lingered on Fallon, still seated, pale and shaken. His smile had vanished. What remained was something closer to shame. And finally, mercifully, the show cut to commercial. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Was Mark Wahlberg right to walk out? Or should he have stayed and salvaged the moment? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories when Hollywood's biggest stars reach their breaking point. Because in an industry built on facades, sometimes the mask slips.